This is the story of America, seen in color for the first time. The 1950s. The American dream comes true.
Welcome to our rock and roll Jubilee of Stars.
The country basks in an economic boom and stands at the pinnacle of world power. Yet it's also a time of fear, of the threat of war and enemies, abroad and at home.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
A new battleground emerges, and a civil rights movement is born.
For him to have died a hero would mean more to me than for him just to have died.
The impact will be felt for decades to come.
I want us to recapture that.
January 4th, 1950. A year into his second term, President Harry Truman delivers his State of the Union address.
The human race has reached a turning point. Man has opened the secrets of nature and mastered new powers. If he uses them wisely, he can reach new heights of civilization. If he uses them foolishly, they may destroy him.
Truman is troubled by a nuclear explosion that took place 4 months earlier, some 6,000 miles away. The Soviet Union tested its first atomic bomb, shocking the United States. Americans believed they were the world's only nuclear power. Now, the country confronts a stunning new threat.
Other nations look to us for a wise exercise of our economic and military strength. We will not fail them.
The U.S. government suspects that the Russians use spies to steal America's nuclear secrets. July 17th, 1950, New York City. 32-year-old communist and former U.S. Army engineer Julius Rosenberg is taken into custody by the FBI. A month later, his wife Ethel is arrested too. They're accused of running a network of Soviet spies at the top secret facilities that built the atom bomb. Found guilty of betraying their country, they are sentenced to death. Some insist that the Rosenbergs are innocent. But most Americans believe that the threat of communism is not only real, but rising. On June 25th, 1950, Communist North Korea, supported by the Soviets and China, invades US-backed South Korea. Truman sends American forces to defend South Korea, determined not to lose any more territory to the communists. General Douglas MacArthur, a hero of the Pacific during World War II, is put in charge of 141,000 Allied troops in Korea. In mid-September, MacArthur delivers a stunning victory at the Battle of Incheon, pushing the North Koreans out of the South. To many, MacArthur looks like a man who can win the war on communism, and possibly even become the next president. October 15th, Truman flies to Wake Island in the Pacific Ocean to meet with his imperious general. Truman is eager to align himself with MacArthur's war hero image.
Plans for the future Korean campaigns were discussed in a simple radio shack, and far-reaching decisions were obtained.
But their smiles soon give way to a bitter dispute that will bring one of them down. 2 weeks later, Communist China enters the war and pushes the U.S. forces into retreat. To retaliate, MacArthur demands authority from Truman to bomb China. Fearing all-out nuclear war with the Soviets, Truman refuses. On March 20th, 1951, General MacArthur makes his disagreement with Truman public in a letter to Speaker of the House, Joseph Martin. MacArthur is now publicly challenging the president, his commander-in-chief. At stake, the principle of civilian control of the military enshrined in the Constitution. Their conflict comes to a head on April 11, 1951. The president addresses the nation.
I believe that we must try to limit the war to Korea to prevent a third world war. A number of events have made it evident that General MacArthur did not agree with that policy. I have therefore considered it essential to relieve General MacArthur.
Truman fires MacArthur. He's gambling that MacArthur's popularity will pass. 6 days after his dismissal, MacArthur returns to the States. He addresses Congress as an American hero.
But I still remember the refrain of one of the most popular barrack ballads of that day, which proclaimed most proudly that old soldiers never die. They just fade away.
But MacArthur has no intention of fading away. On April 20th, 1951, New Yorkers turn out for a parade in his honor. $7.5 million people pack the streets. Truman, seen here taking his daily walk around Washington, is an embattled president. The war in Korea is unpopular, and issues on the home front all lead to a plummet in his approval rating to 22%, the lowest number since records began. But Truman and his Democratic Party have an ace up their sleeves. 6 years after the end of World War II, America is wealthier than ever. 2/3 of Americans now live in urban areas, attracted by booming job markets. But city living space is at a premium. Marriage rates among the returning war veterans are soaring. Nearly 4 million baby boomers are being born each year. These new young families soon start to look for space outside the city. A family named the Levitts sees a massive opportunity. During World War II, William Levitt served as a lieutenant in the Seabees, the construction arm of the Navy. He returns to the family building business with a plan. used the military method to mass-produce homes on old farmland. That way, he can create new communities overnight.
We had to build houses for people to live in. We had to build a water system and a sewer system. We had to set up a police department, put in roads, erect streetlights so that people could feel secure.
Farmhouses are burnt down and bulldozed to make way for thousands of new affordable homes built in orderly lots. William's brother Alfred is the designer. His method is to break down the building of each home into 27 uniform stages. Stop-motion footage shows an entire house being put up in a single day. Construction workers are each trained to do just one stage.
These are the 36 men who built this house. Another day, another 40 houses.
William Levitt calls the developments Levittowns. This is Levittown, Pennsylvania. Around the country, the Levitts build nearly 38,000 houses by 1958. The mass-produced dwellings sell for just under $10,000 each. Young families flock to buy a piece of the American dream. It's the good life in the suburbs. But the shadows of communism and the atomic bomb are never far away. Las Vegas, Nevada, March 1953. Newspaper reporter Lewis Harris from Augusta, Georgia, is assigned to cover a unique event staged by the U.S. government. Harris brings his own home movie camera.
At Las Vegas, newsmen and photographers arrive from all over the nation to cover an event that has a direct bearing on the welfare of every American family.
They are taken 75 miles into the desert, where an atomic bomb is to be detonated for the first time on live TV. The test will record the effects of an A-bomb on the average American home. 50 cars and 2 wooden frame houses are placed within the blast zone.
Within the house, scenes typical of the American family at home. First floor living room, first floor dining room. Children at play, unaware of approaching disaster.
March 17th. 8 million viewers tune in to the unprecedented broadcast.
3, 2, 1, 0.
And witness the terrifying power of an atomic bomb. Harris captures this rare amateur footage of the devastating blast.
House number 1, first floor disintegrated. Second floor collapsed. In house number 2, a cracked beam above the basement box-type shelter. But within, this family, which was prepared, was neither moved nor harmed.
Americans everywhere want to know how to survive this kind of terrifying attack. Drills in schools become routine. Public shelters are identified in every city. And Bert the Turtle prepares everyone to duck and cover.
There was a turtle by the name of Bert, and Bert the Turtle was very alert. When danger threatened him, he never got hurt. He knew just what to do. He ducked and covered.
Calming the nation's fears is a new and very popular leader. January 20th, 1953. The victorious World War II General Dwight D. Eisenhower is inaugurated as President of the United States.
I, Dwight D. Eisenhower, do solemnly swear
that you will faithfully execute the office.
He promises to end the war in
This
Korea.
conflict strikes directly at the fate of our fathers and at the lives of our sons. We wish our friends the world over to know this above all. We face the threat not with dread and confusion, but with confidence and conviction.
7 months later, with Soviet leader Joseph Stalin dead and enemy forces in Korea exhausted, Eisenhower forces an armistice and brings the troops home. Americans are happy to have their soldiers back. Though Eisenhower has held off the threat of communism overseas, fear of the Reds inside America is growing steadily worse.
One communist of one university is one communist too many.
Since 1950, Wisconsin Senator Joseph McCarthy has been accusing the government and leading universities of harboring communists.
One communist among the American advisors at Yalta was one communist too many.
At the 1952 Republican National Convention, he inflames fears that domestic communists are secretly plotting to betray America.
Even if there are only one communist in the State Department, that would still be one communist too many.
McCarthy is ambitious and ruthless. His sensational but often baseless charges win him attention and power. In January 1953, as Republicans take control of the Senate, he becomes chairman of a committee that can compel people to testify. McCarthy runs his investigations in parallel with the House Un-American Activities Committee, which has been hunting for communists since the 1930s.
Have you ever been a member of the Communist Party? I'm framing my answer in the only way in which any American...
Its most celebrated targets are a group of actors, writers, and directors called the Hollywood 10.
Refuse to answer that question. Is that correct?
Stars come east to stand up to the committee, including actors Humphrey Bogart and Lorne Bacall. One of the first to speak is Ronald Reagan.
I do not believe that the communist has ever at any time been able to use the motion picture screen as a sounding board for his philosophy or ideology.
To the American public, and they will know where I stand as they do from what I have written.
But the stain of accusation ends countless Hollywood careers. In early 1954, with his power at its peak, Senator McCarthy takes a gamble. Armed with the flimsiest of evidence, he takes on a respected institution, the U.S. Army. He claims it is infiltrated by communists and that senior officers are turning a blind eye.
If a stupid, arrogant, or witless man in a position of power appears before our committee and is found aiding the Communist Party, he will be exposed. The fact that he might be a general places him in no special class as far as I'm concerned.
The explosive charges trigger public hearings in the Senate. Live TV coverage provides millions of Americans with their first sustained look at the crusading senator and his bare-knuckle methods.
In this committee, activities may well determine whether this nation will live or die.
I want to make it clear that the United States Army does not coddle communists. This committee knows that. The American people know that.
For over a month, McCarthy and his team exchange fire with the Army's counsel.
You shouldn't do that, Mr. Simonson. That's just dishonest. That's the same thing that the Communist Party is doing too long.
Apparently, every time anybody says anything against anybody working for Senator McCarthy, he is swearing them and is accusing them of communism.
He runs away. He won't answer the question.
June 9, 1954. A lawyer for the Army, Joseph Welch, demands that McCarthy's staff release its secret list of alleged Army subversives. McCarthy responds by dredging up a past link between a young lawyer in Welch's firm and the Communist Party.
I don't think you have any conception of the danger of the Communist Party.
After years of bullying his victims, McCarthy is smug and confident. But Welch counterattacks.
Until this moment, Senator, I think I never really gauged your cruelty or your recklessness. If it were in my power to forgive you for your reckless cruelty, I would do so. I like to think I'm a gentleman. But your forgiveness will have to come from someone other than me. Mr. Chairman.
Millions of Americans watch.
He was just baiting, he hasn't baiting.
Senator, may we not drop this? Let us not assassinate this lad further, Senator. You've done enough. Have you no sense of decency, sir? At long last, have you left no sense of decency?
McCarthy's gamble, taking on the Army, backfires.
Mr. Welch here has been...
His charges don't stick. Many in his own party turn against him. 6 months later, the Senate officially censures him. His reign of terror is over, and his reputation in tatters. He falls into the grip of alcoholism, which in 1957 kills him at the age of 48. McCarthy, in many ways, was destroyed by the power of television, a power that in the 1950s will only continue to grow. By 1954, over half of American homes contain a television set.
A life as happy as I can be.
Creating an enormous new audience for advertising.
Two, one, and we're on the air.
I dreamed I went riding in my very favorite convertible with my very favorite boyfriend.
Chevy's Bel Air convertible is released in 1953. With its iconic curved windshield and chrome interiors, it soon becomes a bestseller. Americans are simply car crazy. These Futura cars are on display in New York in 1956. Americans now own over 3/4 of the world's automobiles. They help transform the nation. The New Jersey Turnpike is one of America's first 4-lane highways. All 118 miles of it are built in just 23 months, opening in 1952.
The New Jersey Turnpike can face any new trials by traffic with confidence that it has paved the way to a new age in road building.
The road is designed with as few curves as possible and lanes 2 feet wider than usual to allow speeds of up to 75 miles per hour. This high-speed road changes the face of American transportation.
The pressing need today is to extend the turnpike from the state of New Jersey throughout the country in a national network of superhighways built for speed and comfort.
President Eisenhower champions plans to spend $27 billion on 40,000 miles of new interstate highways that will take 35 years to complete. The network continues to expand today. This vast new road network enables people to drive further and faster than ever before. But these roads may also be good for military use. Many overpasses are 17 feet high, which allows clearance for nuclear missile transporters. Eisenhower is preparing America for a foreign attack. But danger also looms from a bitter battle here at home over civil rights. In 1954, in the South, racial segregation is still mandated by law. Blacks must use separate facilities, which whites say are still equal. But African Americans, in fact, are treated as second-class citizens. In Kansas, the families of 20 black schoolchildren are fighting a class action lawsuit against the Topeka Board of Education's segregated schools. They take their battle to the Supreme Court. Prominent black attorney Thurgood Marshall speaks for the families.
We believe that the proper place for the issue of segregation and anything connected with it is in a court.
On May 17, 1954, they win the case. The Supreme Court outlaws segregation in schools. The legal underpinnings of racism are swept away. But this victory for the civil rights movement infuriates a group determined to uphold white supremacy, the Ku Klux Klan.
I, for one, under God, will die before I'll yield 1 inch to that kind of a movement.
Over the next 3 years, more than 15 African American homes will be bombed in racist attacks. And in 1955, an ugly racial incident in the South shocks the nation. 14-year-old Emmett Till from Chicago is visiting relatives in Money, Mississippi. On August 24th, a 21-year-old white woman, Carolyn Bryant, accuses Emmett of whistling at her. It might not have meant much in Chicago, but in Mississippi, there is rage. Two white men kidnap Emmett. They take him to a riverbank where he is beaten, shot, and killed. September 3rd, 1955, Chicago. Emmett's mother, Mamie, holds his funeral.
If the death of my son can mean something to the other unfortunate people all over the world, then for him to have died a hero would mean more to me than for him just to have died.
It takes 3 days for all who have come to make their way through the church. Mamie Till insists that Emmett's coffin remain open. She wants the world to see just what was done to her son. One in every 5 mourners, Mamie is told, needs help to leave the building. The shocking scenes are shown on national television. And 9 days later, Emmett's beaten face is shown in the African American press, in Jet magazine and the Chicago Defender newspaper. The image horrifies America. September 19th, Sumner, Mississippi. The 2 men accused of murdering Emmett are Carolyn Bryant's husband, Roy, and his friend, J.W. Milam. The trial is covered on national television. For the first time, millions of Americans will see Southern justice for themselves. The trial lasts for only 5 days. The all-white jury deliberates for 67 minutes. And finds the men not guilty. Four months later, in a Look magazine interview for which they are paid $4,000, Bryant and Millam both admit to the murder. But the double jeopardy rule means they cannot be tried again. They are never punished for their crime. "100 days after Emmett Till's murder, 42-year-old Rosa Parks is riding in the black section of a bus in Montgomery, Alabama, when a white man boards. All the white seats are taken.
The driver demanded that I give this seat up for a white man. I didn't feel that I was being treated as a human being. I refused to give up this seat. I said no, and I wouldn't give it up.
Parks says later, "I thought of Emmett Till. I just couldn't move." She is arrested, found guilty of violating segregation laws, and fined $10. Her defiant action inspires black people to protest segregation on the buses by refusing to ride them. Many blacks in Montgomery walk miles to work each day. Images of empty buses and peaceful protesters on national TV recruit many to the cause of equal rights. The bus boycott continues for more than a year. The Montgomery bus lines face bankruptcy. The leaders of the protest also take their battle to the courts. On November 13, 1956, the U.S. Supreme Court rules that segregation on Alabama buses is unconstitutional. But for the civil rights movement, the struggle is far from over. By 1955, Americans are experiencing a golden decade. America is the richest country in the world. Employment is high, wages are rising. Families like the Nyes from Columbia, South Carolina, have cash to splash on air travel and vacations. Their children, Douglas and Nell, reap the benefits. They're part of a new generation flooding the market. Teenagers. Teen girls spend $8.2 million a year on lipstick. So while their parents worry about the A-bomb, most teenagers just want to have a blast. Dancing becomes so popular that most local urban television stations have a weekly teen dance show, like this one in Iowa. Local teens get the chance to try out the latest dance moves and be on television.
And here he is in person, Alan Freed.
Hello, everybody. How y'all? Welcome to our Jubilee of Stars.
Cleveland radio DJ Alan Freed rockets to fame and movie stardom by playing rhythm and blues, traditionally African-American music. Freed popularizes a name for this new sound: rock and roll.
Now, nail down the roof, gang, because here's a new act that can blow it right up.
Freed brings rock and roll to a young white audience. But to make the big bucks, music producers want a white face to front the new African-American sound. In 1954, producer Sam Phillips introduces a 19-year-old singer from Tupelo, Mississippi. His name is Elvis Presley. By 1956, his Heartbreak Hotel sells 1 million records and stays at #1 for 7 weeks. The power of rock and roll becomes unstoppable. Ed Sullivan hosts the most popular show on television. His musical taste, middle of the road.
Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Your Mercury dealer.
But on September 9th, 1956, he puts rock and roll's biggest new face in front of America.
#1 TV variety show, starring the nationally syndicated columnist of the New York Daily News, Ed Sullivan.
Elvis Presley simply cannot be denied. This is the first time this footage has ever been seen in color.
Thank you, Mr. Lawton. Ladies and gentlemen. Well, this is probably the greatest honor that I've ever had in my life. There's not much I can say except maybe it makes you feel good.
This is the most watched show of the decade, bringing in 60 million viewers. The popularity of Elvis and rock and roll explodes. The new teenage music upsets many American parents. But some teenagers are rebelling in a more idealistic way, daring to confront bigotry and violence. It's 1957, 3 years since the Supreme Court ordered that black and white students should be taught together. But in the South, the vast majority of schools are still segregated. In the summer of 1957, the NAACP selects 9 black students to enroll at the all-white Central High School in Little Rock, Arkansas. On September 4th, the start of the school semester, segregationist Governor Orville Faubus stations the Arkansas National Guard outside the high school to stop the 9 students from entering. The guardsmen are joined by an angry mob of white parents and students. Eight black students approach the school together. The guardsmen push them back. The 9th student, Elizabeth Eckford, unaware of the others' plans, arrives later and alone. She is followed by an angry crowd. As she retreats, Will Counts, a photographer for the Arkansas Democrat newspaper, takes these iconic photographs. Six days later, Governor Faubus reiterates his refusal to integrate the school.
If the federal government moves into Arkansas by force or in any other manner, then we will have lost our last right of local self-government.
Angry protests continue outside Central High School.
If blood has been shed, my conscience will be clear, but I will weep for my people.
For 3 weeks, the 9 students stay at home. Going to school is too dangerous. The scenes of racist abuse continue and are seen around the world. By September 24th, President Eisenhower has seen enough.
Mob rule can not be allowed
to override the decisions of our courts.
Eisenhower federalizes the Arkansas National Guard, taking control away from the governor. And that evening, the president sends 1,200 paratroopers from the Army's 101st Airborne Division to Little Rock. At 7 the next morning, the 9 students are transported to Central High School in an Army vehicle. The mob is held back, and black and white Little Rock students go to school together for the first time, escorted by U.S. soldiers. For their safety, the 9 students are accompanied by troops every day for the rest of the school year. It is a huge victory for the civil rights movement, but it is short-lived. A year later, Governor Faubus, with the voters' support, closes all public high schools in Little Rock.
I wouldn't mind going to school with them, but if you go to school with them, then they're going to start coming to our dances and things like that, and I wouldn't want that.
I see. How do you feel?
I definitely do not want to go to school to integrated classes, and I think...
You don't want to go to an integrated
no,
school
sir,
at all?
I do not, and I'd much rather school be closed than forget my education for 2 or 3 months.
Though it takes until 1959, the high schools do reopen for black and white students together. As the decade nears its end, Americans face a very different challenge in space. October 4th, 1957. News broadcasts lead with the sound of a distant beep. A beacon from a beach ball-sized object weighing just 183 pounds that sends shockwaves through America. The Soviet Union has launched the first ever artificial satellite, Sputnik, into space.
Science has broken the chains that for centuries shackled humans to the planet Earth.
Just 1 month later, the Soviets launch a second satellite.
This is the dog Laika. It had been trained to live in a special container.
This latest Russian space vehicle is some 50 times bigger than the satellite America is developing, and capable of carrying not just a dog, but a nuclear warhead.
From Sputnik 2, 160 miles above the Earth, listen for the heartbeat of Laika.
Americans feel more vulnerable than ever. Every city and town is within striking range of Soviet missiles. After 10 years of rivalry with the Russians, America is humiliated, exposed as being technologically behind. America, it seems, is losing the Cold War. A month after Sputnik 2, the U.S. rushes to launch its own satellites on an unproven rocket. The press calls the attempt Flopnik and Kaputnik.
Even if it didn't get up into orbit, it was a darn good picture.
In January 1958, America finally launches a satellite into space, Explorer 1. Seen in color for the first time. This is the first American spacecraft. The American space age has arrived, and with it, a new government agency, the National Aeronautics and Space Administration, NASA. It is determined to catch and surpass the Soviets. First, NASA has to find Americans with the courage and talent to go into space. The nation's test pilots push the limits of technology and human bravery every day. On average, one dies every week. Propelling these daredevils to test the limits of speed is the X-15, the fastest plane ever built.
One to jettison. Okay, here we go with the countdown.
.508 test pilots are screened for NASA's newly invented job of astronaut. 36 are chosen to compete for a handful of coveted slots. They face medical and psychological evaluations, physical tests to see how they cope with pressure at 65,000 feet and stress under a force of 8 Gs. On April 9, 1959, NASA Administrator Dr. Keith Glenning introduces the world to 7 men.
Which of these men will be first to orbit the Earth, I cannot tell you. He won't know himself until the day of the flight.
They are Malcolm Scott Carpenter, Leroy Gordon Cooper, Virgil Grissom, Walter Schirra, Alan Shepard, Donald Deke Slayton, and John Glenn.
I'm John Glenn. I'm the lonesome Marine on this outfit, and I'm 37.
In 3 years, Glenn will become the first American to orbit the Earth.
My feelings are that this whole project with regard to space sort of stands with us now, as if you want to look at it one way, like the Wright brothers stood at Kitty Hawk about 50 years ago.
They are 7 all-American heroes, ready to compete with communism on a new battlefront. For 10 years, the nation has been pushing the limits of the American dream. Prosperity has enabled people to build, travel, and dance their way to the future. And those long left out are now demanding justice, despite fearful conflicts at home and abroad. Millions of Americans will remember the 1950s as the glory years.